Okay, so I wish you could see how many points of light I have picked out to share with you. This is a very deep book. What I loved about this book, The Rancher's Wild Secret, um, Emerson Maxfield is a sheltered beauty who never steps out of line. Now she must marry her family's enemy dis- before desire spells downfall for them all. There's blackmail. There's a guy fighting his feelings for this woman because he's doing this out of revenge, out of spite. He doesn't really want to marry her. But it just makes it better for him out of what he's trying to do to get his revenge on her daddy. And it's a complicated yet layered story that just creates a masterpiece. And I really hope that you enjoy this half as much as I did. We're going to start in at page 196. Uh, Emerson looked out across the vast expanse of fields and frowned when she saw a figure moving among the vines. 197. It was a man. She could even tell from the balcony that he had a lean, rangy body and long strides of a man who was quite tall. "Who's that?" she asked. "I don't know," Cricket said, peering down below. "Should I go get Dad?" "No," Emerson said. "I can go down." She knew exactly who was supposed to be at the party and who wasn't. And if this man was one of the Coopers from the cowboy vines, then she would have reason to feel concerned that he was down there sniffing around to get trade secrets. Not that their top rival had ever stooped to that kind of espionage before, but she didn't trust anyone, not really. Winemaking was a competitive industry and was becoming more so. Emerson's sister Wren always became livid at the mere mention of the Cooper name, and she was constantly muttering about all the manner of dirty tricks that they could possibly employ to get ahead. So really anything was possible. "I'll just run down there and check it out." "You're going to go down there and investigate by yourself?" "I'm fine." Emerson waved a hand. "I have a cell phone. The place is heavily populated right now. I don't think I'm going to have any issues." "Emerson." Emerson slipped back inside out the side door, moving quickly down the stairs, not listening to her sister at all. She didn't know why, but she felt compelled to go see this man for herself. Maybe because his arrival was the first truly interesting thing to happen all evening. She was in the direction where she last seen the figure stepping out of the golden pool of the light spilling from the party into the grapevines. The moonlight was illuminated by her steps through it was pale and left her hand looking waxen. She rounded a row of grapevines into the next and then stopped frozen. She had known he was tall, even from a distance, but he was very tall and broad. Broad shoulders, broad chest. He was wearing a cowboy hat, which seemed ridiculous at night because it wasn't keeping the sun off him. He had on a black tight t-shirt and a pair of jeans, and he was not a Cooper. She had never seen this man before in her life. He saw her and stopped walking. He lifted his head up, and the moonlight caught his features. His face was sculptured beautiful, so much so that it immobilized her, that square jaw was visible even in the dim light. "Have you lost your way?" she asked. "The party is that way, though I'm fairly certain you're not on the guest list." "I wasn't invited to any party," he said. His voice was rough and raspy, but made for sin. Made for sin, she thought. She didn't know where such a thought had come from, except it was easy to imagine that voice saying all kinds of sinful things, and she couldn't even credit why. "Then forgive me, but what are you doing here?" "I work here," he said. "I'm the new ranch hand." Now, what is interesting about this moment where they're getting introductions going, she's already attracted to him, but she doesn't know why. But yet he finds her more as like a annoyance, a person that he didn't want there, and he didn't ask for her to be there, and he's just trying to check the place out, but she's wondering why. Um, I will read this part here because it's kind of cute. Damn if she wasn't Little Red Riding Hood delivered right to the big bad wolf. Except she wasn't wearing a scarlet cloak, it was a scarlet dress to her curves, wrapping paper around like a tempting present. Her hair was dark lined, silvered by the moonbeams and tumbling around the shoulders. He could picture her and him together. I'm trying to make it PG. It was a shame he wasn't there for pleasure. He was there for revenge. And if he guessed correctly, based on what he knew about Maxfield, the family, this was Emerson Maxfield, who often had her face across magazine covers for food and wine features, and who becomes something out of it as the it girl for clothing brands as well. Gorgeous, recognizable, also engaged. But none of that would have deterred him if he really wanted her. And Holden, he's thinking highly of himself, that he could have her if he wanted to, basically. Okay, we're going to move ahead. I just thought that was a cute part because he always refers to her as Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. Page 208. You have to be careful, her father said. You don't want any photographers taking of you alone with a man who's not Donovan. You don't need anything to compromise your engagement. Sometimes she wondered if her father realized they didn't live in the Victorian age. Nothing is going to compromise my engagement to Donovan. I'm glad you're certain about it. She was, in spite of the occasional doubts. Her father might not understand that times have changed, but she did, and she felt certain Donovan was carrying on with other women in the absence of a physical relationship with her. Why should she assume anything else? He was a man, after all. She knew why her father was so invested in marriage to Donovan. As part of the planned retirement, her father was giving ownership stakes in the winery to each of his daughter's husbands. He felt Donovan would be an asset to the winery, and Emerson agreed, but she wasn't sure how she fit into a marriage. Clearly Donovan didn't much care about how she fit into the marriage either, and she doubted he would be able to muster up any kind of jealousy over her behavior. Image, her father said, bringing her back to the moment. It isn't what you do that matters, Emerson. It's what you think the world thinks that you're doing. There was something about the way her father said it, so smooth and cold, that made her feel chilled. It shouldn't chill her, because she agreed to the image was important in their business. Still, it did chill her. Emerson shifted. Right. Well, no worries there. Image is my expertise. It's all about the brand, he said. I tell you that, she said, and you've done it well. Thank you, she said, nearly flushed with pleasure. Compliments from James Maxfield were rare, and she clung to them when she got them. You should head down to the stables. He'll be waiting for you. And if that made her stomach tighten, she ignored that sensation. She had a job to do, and that job had nothing to do with how that tall new ranch manager was. Good morning, she said. Good morning to you, too. I take it you spoke with your father? It took all of his self-control for that word to come out smoothly. Yes, I did, she said. And what do you think of his proposition? In Holden's opinion, it was a good one, and when he was through ruining James and sinking his brand, Holden might very well buy the entire property and continue wine himself. He was good at selling things, making money. He could make more money here. It's good. I think a few well-placed selfies will drum up interest. You're probably right, though. I can't say I'm really up on selfies. That was a lie. His younger sister was pretty powerful influencer, a model who had met James Maxfield at one of the parties that had brought their type together. He was angry at himself for that part. His own money had played a part in all of this, because Sonia had been an innocent, a sweet young girl from a small town who had been catapulted into a lifestyle that she hadn't been prepared to handle. Holden could relate well enough. He certainly hadn't known how to handle money in the beginning, but he had been helping his family dig out of a hole they found themselves in. The first thing he'd done was buy his mother a house up on a hill, fancy and safe from men who had used her all throughout Holden's childhood. And his sweet younger half-sister, she tumbled headfirst into fame. She was beautiful. That much had always been apparent, but she had that lean, hungry kind of beauty, honed by years of poverty, her backstory lending even more interest to her sharp cheekbones, unearring the sense of style. She had millions of people following her, waiting to see her next picture, waiting to see which party she would attend, and she attended the wrong ones when she met James Maxfield. He pounced on her before Holden could say daddy issues, and James had left her devastated. Holden would never forget having to admit for his sister for a psychiatric hold. Sonia's suicide attempt, the miscarriage, and the devastation. It was burned in him, along with the reality that his money hadn't protected her. His money had opened her up to this. Now all that was left was revenge, because he couldn't make it right. He couldn't take away her pain, but he could take away everything from the Maxfield family. And that was what he intended to do. I don't think we've officially met, she said. She stuck her hand out, the one that didn't have the ring on it, that angled at her side. The gems sparkled in the sunlight. I'm Emerson Maxfield. Holden Brown, he said, extending his own hand. If James Maxfield weren't a raging narcissist, Holden might have worried you about using his real first name. But he doubted the older man would ever connect the younger model he used for a couple of months and then discarded with Holden. Why would he? James probably barely remembered Sonia's first name, much less any of her family connections. Holden himself wasn't famous, and that was how he liked it. He always thought that it would be handy to have an anonymity, and he hadn't imagined it would be for reasons of revenge. He closed his hand around hers. It was soft, desperately so, the hand of a woman who never had done hard labor in her life, and something in him suddenly felt desperate to make this little princess go down and do some dirty work. He pulled his hand away. It's nice to meet you, Holden, she said. Nice to meet you, too. He bit the pleasantry off at the end because anything more, and he might make a mistake. I have some routes in mind for this new venture. Let's go for a ride. Can I ask you a question? His voice was deep and thick like honey, and it made Emerson feel like she was on the verge of a sugar high. She never felt anything like this before. This was, she supposed, was chemistry, and she couldn't for the life of her figure out why he was suddenly with this man who inspired it. She had met so many men who weren't so far outside the sphere of what she'd be at finding attractive. She'd met the parties all around the world. None of those men, including the one her father wanted her to be engaged to, had managed to elicit this kind of response in her. And yet Holden did it effortlessly. Ask away, she said, resolutely fixing her focus on the scene around them. Anything to keep from fixating on him. Why the hell did you wear that, knowing we were going out riding? I have never seen anyone get on a horse in something so impractical. She blinked and turned and looked at him. What's wrong with my outfit? Oh, come on now. Surely you've seen period pieces where the woman is in a giant dress riding side saddle. Yes, he said, but you have other options. It has to be photographable, she said. And you couldn't do some sexy cowgirl thing, considering he was playing the part of the sexy cowboy in his tight black t-shirt and black cowboy hat. She suddenly wished that she was playing the part of the sexy cowgirl. Then she's thinking out loud in her head, you've lost your mind. That isn't exactly aesthetic. Your aesthetic is I dream of Jeannie in the morning. She laughed. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I'm sure that if I dream of Jeannie in the morning sounds about right. In fact, I think I might go ahead and label that outfit when I post the pics. Whatever works, he said. His comment was funny, and okay, maybe the fact that he had a couple of clever times in her presence was bestowing the label of funny on him too early. But it made her feel a little bit better about her wayward hormones, that he wasn't just beautiful, that he was fascinating as well. So today's ride just isn't a scouting mission for you, he said, if you're worried about your aesthetic. No, I just want to start generating interest in the ideas. You know, pictures of me on the horse. In fact, hang on a second. She stopped maneuvering her mount, turning so she was facing Holden with a brilliant backdrop of the trail, the mountains behind them. Then she flipped her phone front-facing and raised it up in the air, tilting it downward and grinning as she hit the button. She looked at the result, frowned, and then did it again. The second one would be just as fine, but she put some filters on it. What was that? She maneuvered her horse back around in the other direction, stuffed her phone in her pocket, and carried on. It was me getting a photograph, she said, one that I can post. Something new and exciting is coming to the Maxfield label. Are you really going to put it like that? Yes, I mean, eventually we'll do official press releases and forms of media, but that way you use social media advertisements is a little different. I personally am a part of the online brand, and my lifestyle includes my clothes. It's a part of what makes people interested in the vineyard. Right, he said. People want to be jealous, she said. If they didn't, they wouldn't spend hours scrolling through photos of other people's lives, or the houses that they'll never be able to live in, exotic locations that they'll never be able to go to. A little envy, that bit of aspiration, it drives people. Do you really believe that? Yes, I think that the success of my portion of the family empire suggests I know what I'm talking about. He didn't say anything for a long moment. You know, I suppose you're right. People choose to indulge in that feeling, but when you really don't have anything, it's not fun to see all that stuff that you'll never have. It cuts deep. It creates a hunger rather than enjoyment. It can drive some people to the edge of destruction. There was something about the way he said it that sent a ripple of disgust through her, because his words didn't sound hypothetical. That's never my goal, she said, and I can't control who consumes the media that I put out there. At a certain point, people have to know themselves, don't they? True enough, he said, but some people don't, and it's worse when there's another person involved who sees weakness in them, even when they don't see it in themselves. Someone who exploits that weakness. Plenty of sad, hungry girls have been lost along that envious road when they took the wrong hand, desperate for a hand up into satisfaction. Well, I'm not selling wild parties, she said. I'm selling an afternoon ride at the family winery, and a trip here is not out of the reach for most people. That's the thing. There's all this wild aspirational stuff out there online, and the vineyard is just a little more accessible. That what makes it advertising and not fluff. I'm having to clean it up just a little bit because, we might have kids watching. I see. Create a desire so big that it can never be filled and then offer a winery as a consolation prize. If the rest of our culture supports it, that's hardly my fault. Have you ever had to want for anything in your entire life, Emerson? That question was asked innocuously enough, but the way he asked it, in the dark, rough voice, made a buzz over her skin, crackling like electricity moving through her. Or have you always been given everything you could ever desire? I've wanted things, she said, maybe too quickly, too defensively. What? He pressed. She desperately went through the catalogue of her life, trying to come up with a moment when she'd been denied something that she wanted in the material sense, and there was only one word that burned in her brain. Him. Yes, that's what she would say, that she wants him and she can't have him because she's engaged to a man who's her, not interested in kissing her, much less getting into bed with her, and I'm no interested in doing that with him, but I can't break off the engagement no matter how much she wants to because she's in so desperate need. Approval, she said. That's something I want. Her stomach twisted and she kept her eyes fixed ahead because she didn't know why she'd let the word escape out loud. She should have said nothing. He wasn't interested in hearing about her emotional issues. From your father? He asked. No, she said, I have this approval. My mother, on the other hand, you're famous, successful, beautiful, and you don't want to have your mother's approval? Yeah, shockingly, my mother's goals was not to take pictures of myself and put them up on the internet. Unless you have a secret stash of pictures, I don't see how your mother could disapprove of these sorts of photographs. Unless, of course, you do, and then those would be questionable. He's making fun of her pants that she's wearing. These are wonderful pants, and they actually are deceptively practical because they allow me to sit on this horse comfortably, whatever you might think. What doesn't your mother approve of? She wanted me to do something more, something that was on my own. She doesn't want me running publicity for the family business, but I like it. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy this brand. Representing it is easy for me because I care about it. I went to school for marketing. It's close to home. She felt like it was limiting my potential. He chuckled. I'm sorry, your mother felt like you were limited to your potential by going to get a degree in marketing and then going to be the ambassador for a successful brand. Yes, she said. She could still remember the brutal irritation in her mother's voice when she told her about the engagement to Donovan. So you're marrying a man more successful in advertising in the broader world, even though you could have done that. You're married to a successful man. I was never given the opportunities that you were given. You don't have to hide behind your husband's shadow. You could have done more. Yeah, that's about the size of it, she said. Look, my mother is brilliant and scrappy, and I respect her, but she's never going to be overly impressed with me. As far as she's concerned, I haven't worked a day in my life for anything, and I took the path of least resistance into her vision of success. What does she think of your sisters? Well, Wren works for the winery too, but only thing annoys my mother more than her daughters is taking a free pass is the Cooper family, and since Wren makes it her life work to go toe-to-toe with them, my mother isn't quite as irritated with everything Wren does. And Cricket, I don't know what anyone knows what Cricket wants. Poor Cricket was a later addition to the family, 8 years younger than Emerson and 6 years younger than Wren. Their parents hadn't planned on having another child, and they especially hadn't planned on one like Cricket, who didn't seem to have inherited the need to please, well, anyone. Cricket had run wild over the winery, raised more by the staff than by her mother and father. Sometimes Emerson envied Cricket and the independence she seemed to have found before turning 21, when Emerson couldn't quite capture independence even at 29. Sounds to me like your mother is pretty difficult to please. Impossible, she agreed. But her father wasn't. He was proud of her. She was doing exactly what he wanted her to do, and she would keep on doing it. The trail ended in a grassy clearing on the side of the mountain overlooking the valley. The wineries rolled on for miles. The little red brick town of Gold Valley was all at the way at the bottom. Yes, she said, this is perfect. She got down off the horse, snapped another few pictures with herself in them, the view of the background, and then a sudden inspiration took hold, and she whipped around quickly, capturing the blurred outline of Holden on his horse with the cowboy hat behind her. He frowned, dismounting the horse, and she looked into the phone screen, keeping her eyes on him, and then took another shot. He was mostly a silhouette, but it was clear that he was good-looking, well-built man in a cowboy hat. Now there's an ad, she said. What are you doing? He sounded angry, not amused at all. I just thought it would be a good to get you in the background, a full-on Western fantasy. You said that this wasn't aesthetic. It's not mine. Just because a girl doesn't want to wear cut-off shorts doesn't mean she's not interested in looking at a cowboy. You can't post that, he said. His voice was hard and like granite. She turned to face him. Why not? Because I don't want to be on your BS website. It's not a website. It's... Never mind. You're not, like, fleeing from the law or something, are you? No, he said, I'm not. Then why won't you let me post the picture? It's not like they can really see you. I'm not interested in that stuff. Well, that stuff is my entire life's work. She turned her focus to the scenery around and pretended to be interested in taking a few more random pictures that were not of him. Some of the website isn't going to exist in a couple of years, and it's not like your life's work. Your life's work might be figuring out how to sell things to people, advertising, marketing, whatever you want to call it. But the how of it is going to change, and it's going to keep on changing. What you've done is to figure out how to understand the way people discover things right now, but it will change, and you'll figure that out too. These pictures are not your life's work. It was an impassioned speech, and the one almost felt certain that he'd given before, though she couldn't quite figure out why he would have to, or to who. That's nice, she said, but I don't need a pep talk. I wasn't belittling myself. I won't post the pictures, though I think they would have caused a lot of excitement. I'm not going to be anyone's trail guide, so there's no point in using me. You're not even my trail guide, not really. She turned to face him and found that he was much closer than she thought. All the breath that was sucked from her body, and he was so big and broad and imposing. There was an intensity about him that should repel her, but yet it fascinated her. The air was warm, and she was a little bit sweaty, and that made it all wonder if he was a little bit sweaty, and something about that made her want to press her face against his chest and just smell his skin. Have you ever gone without something? She didn't know why she asked him that, except maybe it was only the thing keeping her from actually giving in to her fantasy and pressing her face against his body. I don't think that it's any of your business. Why not? I just downloaded all of my family issues onto you, and I'm not even sure why, except that you ask, and I don't think anyone else has ever asked, so it's just you and me out here. And your phone, which is your link to the outside world on a scale that I barely understand. Somehow that rang false. I don't have service, she said. Anyway, my phone is going back into my pocket. She slipped it into the back of her silky pocket of her black pants. And we're going forward. And everybody's like, well, what happened next? You got to pick up the book and find out. Right now, she's going to ask Donovan a few questions. By cell phone, of course. She's texting. And then suddenly she picked up the phone and started a new message. Are we exclusive? There were no dots, no movement. She set the phone down and tried to look away. It pinged a few minutes later. We are engaged. She responded, that's not an answer. His response, we don't live in the same city. She took a breath. Have you slept with someone else? She wasn't going to wait around for the back and forth nonsense. She wasn't interested in him sparring himself repercussions. We don't live in the same city. Period. So yes, I have. And if I did, whatever you do before the wedding is your business. She didn't respond. His next text came in on the last heels of the last. Do you want to talk on the phone? No. He put K. Page 232. Her father didn't ask much of her, and he gave her endless support. If she disappointed him, well, then she would be a failure all around, wouldn't she? He's not choosing Wren's husband. He's not choosing Cricket's. Well, Wren would likely refuse, and Emerson couldn't imagine a strong-headed sister giving in to that. And Cricket, well, nobody could tame Cricket. Her father hadn't asked them, and he asked her, and she agreed. because that was who she was, and she was the one who could be counted on for anything, and it was too late to stop being who she was now. Texting Donovan had been insane, leaning toward Holden and been even more insane, and she didn't have time for any of that behavior. She had a campaign to launch, and she was going to do it because she knew who she was. She was not the kind of person who kissed men she barely knew, not the kind of person who engaged in a physical-only fling, not the kind of person who crossed professional boundaries. The problem was Holden made her feel very, very not like herself, and that was the most concerning thing of all. Okay. Page 237 and 238. He managed to steer clear of the youngest daughter, Cricket, who always seemed to be flitting in and out of place, and he's seen Wren on many occasions marching around purposefully, but he hadn't quite figured out exactly what her purpose was, nor did he want to. But Emerson he couldn't seem to stay away from, or maybe she couldn't seem to stay away from him. At the end of it all, he didn't know if it mattered which it was. They kept colliding either way. "You must be very good with horses," she said. "I don't know about that, but I was here available to do this job, so your father gave it to me." She tilted her head to the side, appraising him like he was a confusing piece of modern art. "Are you married?" "Hell no," he said. "No desire for that kind of nonsense." "You think love is nonsense?" she pressed. "You didn't ask me about love. You asked me about marriage." "Don't they usually go together?" "Does it for you? Because you nearly kissed me yesterday and you're wearing another man's ring." Great, he'd gone and brought that up. Not a good idea, all things considered, though it might make her angry, and if he could get her good and angry, that might be for the best. Maybe then she could stay away. "I told you we're not living near each other right now, so we have an arrangement." "So you said, but what does that matter? Or what does that mean?" "We're not exclusive." "Then what the hell's the point of being engaged? As I understand it, the only reason to put a ring on a woman's finger is to make her yours. Sure and certain, if you were my woman, I certainly wouldn't let another man touch you." Her cheeks flushed red. "Well, you certainly have a lot of opinions for someone who doesn't see a point of the institution of marriage." "Isn't the point possession? Women aren't seen as cattle anymore, so no." "I didn't mean a woman being a possession. The husband and wife possess each other. Isn't that the point?" She snorted. "I think that often the point is destiny and connections, don't you?" "Damn, that's cynical, even for me." She ignored that. "So you're good with horses, and you don't believe in marriage," she said. "Anything else?" "Not a thing." "If you don't believe in marriage, then what do you believe in?" "Passion," he said, "for as long as it burns hot, but that's it." She nodded slowly and then turned away from him. "Aren't you going to ride?" Not right now. I need to go think." And without another word, Emerson Maxfield ran away from him. Okay. Page 242. We're getting a lot of paper clips, so it's getting harder to turn the pages. And I'll probably have to stop and make at least 2 videos here in a minute, unfortunately, but so I can take some of these paper clips out and maybe the book will lie a little flatter. A look at her hand. He noticed she didn't have her engagement ring on. "What the hell kind of game are you playing?" he asked. "You said whatever happened between you." Okay, they do a little bit of friendly banter. "I don't love my fiancé. I haven't slept with him. Why? Because I'm not interested in sleeping with him. It's the strangest thing. We've been together for a couple of years, but we don't live near each other. And every time we could have, we just didn't. And the fact that we're not even tempted, well, that should tell you something about chemistry between us. But this, you and I want to do this with you. It's all I can think about. Trust me when I say it's not me. I don't understand it. I didn't ask for it, didn't want it, but I can't find it. I'm supposed to be flattered that you're designing to come over here, your shining tower. You can't even stop thinking about me." They do a lot of more desire chat back and forth. "You said you had an arrangement," he stated. "Oh, Donovan wouldn't care. Donovan knows. I mean, in a vague sense. I texted him to make sure I wasn't just making assumptions, and I found out he already has been with someone else, so it's not a big deal. But my father, he would never want it made public. Image is everything to him, and my engagement to Donovan is part of his image right now." And just like that, he sensed that her relationship with her father was a whole lot more complicated than she let on. But her relationship with James wasn't Holden's problem either way, and neither was whether or not Emerson was a good person, or one who covered up her father's transgressions. None of it mattered. Nothing really mattered here but the two of them. The real fascinating thing was Emerson didn't know who Holden was, and even if she didn't need anything from him. Not monetarily. It had been a long time since he'd been with a woman, and here he was standing here with none of that, uh, nothing but a dilapidated cabin that wasn't even his. And yet they talked about desire. Uh, and he's like, so let me get this straight. You haven't even kissed me. You don't even know if I want to kiss you, but you're willing to come down here to be with me. What would the payoff be? Her face was frozen in beauty profound, even as she stared at him with blank blue eyes and her red lips pressed into a thin line, and he realized that she was not just a woman who knew how to endure being questioned. She was a woman used to getting to what she wants, a woman used to commanding the show, and this much was clear. It was obvious to Emerson, who was accustomed to bulldozing down doors, a characteristic that seemed to stand sharp in a contrast to the fact that she also held deep corners over what her parents thought of her and her decisions. That should tell you then, she said the word stiff, it should tell you how strong I think connection is. If it's not strong for you, that's fine. You're not on the verge of getting married, you're just a man after all, so you'll have boom boom. And they discussed boom boom. A little bit more desire talk. He couldn't remember the last time he even felt he wanted a woman like her. And he didn't know if it was the touch of the forbidden adding to the thrill, or if it was the fact that she was the daughter of his enemy and wanted revenge. Because he could do nothing for Emerson Maxfield, not Holden Brown, the man he was pretending to be, the man who had depended on the good graces of his employer and lived in a cabin on the property. There was nothing he could do for her, nothing he could do but be with her. Putting it nicely, and she was a woman set to marry another man. She didn't even want emotions from him. She wanted nothing but to be with him. And he couldn't remember the last time that was ever the case, if ever. Everyone wanted something from him. Everyone wanted a piece of him. Even his mother and sister, who cared for him dearly, needed him. They needed his money. They needed his support. And they needed him to engage in a battle to destroy the man who just devastated his sister Sonia. But this woman standing in front of him sparked heat and wanted to become a blaze. So who was he to deny her? Moving on. Page 265. Holden waited there for there to be guilt, but he didn't feel it. Instead, he felt some kind of indefinable sense of satisfaction. In the past few moments, he had collected another chess piece that had once belonged to his enemy. And Emerson was so much more than a pawn, but he didn't know how to play this victory, not yet. And anyway, she didn't feel much like a victory or a conquest being with him when he was still there with her. He felt more like a little bit of conquered himself. This is terrifying, she whispered, because I shouldn't be here. And I shouldn't be with you at all, and I think this is the more relaxed I've ever been, maybe the happiest I've ever been and I've felt in my life. She looked up at him, and a tear trickled down her cheek, and just like that guilt hit him right in the chest. And I know it can't go beyond tonight. I know that it can't, because you have your life and I have mine. And there's no chance those two things could ever cross, he said, the words coming out a hell of a lot more hostile than he intended. I'm not trying to be snobby or anything, she said, but there's expectations about the kind of man that I'll end up with and what he'll bring to the family. Princess, I don't know why you're talking about marriage. Well, there's another problem in it and of itself, isn't it? I'm that point where marriage has to be considered. You're at that point? What the hell does that mean? Are we in the 1800s? In a family like mine, it matters. We have to. My father does not have sons. He has daughters that has to marry well, marry men who respect and uphold the winery. His son-in-laws are going to gain a certain amount of ownership in this place, and that means his son-in-laws are getting ownership of the business? Yes, she said. I mean, I'll retain my share as well, so don't think it's that kind of draconian nonsense, but when we marry, Donovan is going to get a share of the winery as large as mine. When Wren marries, it will be the same. Then there will be Cricket, and her husband will get a share that as well as not as large, and by that time it'll all be finished, and my father will only have a portion, a very small portion. How does that math work? Does Cricket get less? Well, so far, Cricket doesn't have any interest in running the place, and she never has, so yes. No wonder your father's so invested in controlling who you marry. It's for my protection as well. It's not like he wants me getting involved with the fortune hunters. You really are from another world, he said. Disdain was in his voice, even though he didn't mention it to be there. Because it didn't matter, because it wasn't true. He had money, he had status, and because he didn't care about her or her opinion, he didn't care that she was as shallow as the rest of her family as her father. It didn't concern him, and in fact it was sort of helpful given the fact that he had taken pretty terrible advantage of her, and that he lied to be with her. I can't tell you I can tell you think that I'm a snob, she said. I'm not, I promise. I wouldn't be with you if I was. Well, that's BS. It's pretty well documented for a fact that people find slumming to be titillating, Emerson. Well, I don't. You're different, and yes, I find that sexy. You're forbidden, and maybe I find that sexy too. But it's not about you being less than me or less than other men that I've been with. Somehow you're more, and I don't know what to do with that. That's why it hurts, because I don't know if I will ever feel as contented ever again, or as if I do right now, lying in this cabin when I'm not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be anything you aspire to. How could it be when your mother thinks that what you have is beneath you as it is? She swallowed and looked away. My life's not mine. It's attached to this thing my father built from scratch. This legacy that meant a life that I'm grateful for. Whatever you might think, I don't need to have gone without to understand that I have been given. It's extraordinary. I do understand that, but it's incredible responsibility to bear as well, and I have to be a steward of it, whether I want to be or not. And suddenly he resented all of it, every last bit. The lies that stood between them, the way she saw him, and his perceived lack of power in this moment. He growled, reversing their sleeping position so he was over her. None of that matters just now, he said. She looked up at him, and then she touched his face. No, she agreed, I don't suppose it does. Okay. We'll get to page 278, then we'll stop this video and make a new video because, like I said, those paper clips are making it hard to work around. Dad has never showed the slightest bit of interest in who I'm dating or not dating. You're not the oldest. I think he figures that he'll get me out of the way first, and if it isn't a matter of him showing interest in who I'm dating, he'll directly told me that Donovan was that sort of man that I should associate with, and he set me up with him. You're just going to marry who Dad tells you to marry? Would you do differently, Wren? Honestly, I'm asking you. I don't think I would marry a man that I wasn't even attracted to. Let's see here. If Dad told you a certain man met with his approval, if he pushed you in that direction, you wouldn't try to make it work? Wren looked away. I don't know. I guess I might. I have to try, but if after 2 years I still wasn't interested physically. Marriage is a partnership. Our bodies will change, and sex drives and attraction will change too. We need to have something in common. I mean, it makes way more sense to marry a man I have a whole host of things in common with than what it does to marry one who I just want to be naked with. I didn't suggest you marry the ranch hand, but perhaps there's some middle ground, a man who you like to talk to and a man you want to sleep with. Well, I have to find the middle ground that would be suitable for Dad. Anyway, Emerson didn't think that Holden could be called middle ground. Not really. He was something so much more than that. Much too extreme to be called something as neutral as middle ground. Maybe you should wait until you do. Or maybe I should just do what feels best, Emerson says. I mean, maybe my marriage won't be the best of the best, but maybe I can't have everything. But we are really lucky, you and I. Look at this life. She gestured around the barn. We have so much. I can make do with whatever I don't have. Wren looked sad. I don't know. That seems tragic to me. What about you? You said you wanted a man. You haven't done anything about it. That's different. So there's a man you want that you can't be with him? I don't even like him, she said. Emerson felt bowled over by that statement because there was only one man Emerson knew whom Wren hated. And the idea that Wren might want him, well, no wonder Wren could barely even speak of it. She hated Creed Cooper more than anything else on this earth. If the two of them ever touched, well, they would be created an explosion one of a kind for each other. Emerson didn't know how she hadn't realized that before, possibly because she had never before experienced that kind of intense clash that she had experienced just a few nights ago with Holden. You do understand, then, Emerson said. That was the difference between wanting and having for a limited time. She looked down. Yes, I'm wildly attracted to this guy, and our chemistry is amazing, but it could never be more than that. There was someone who has experienced the temporary fun. You could, you knew. You know you could. Wren affected a full-body shudder. I really couldn't. I really, really couldn't. Suit yourself, but I'm going to go ahead and say that you're not allowed to give me advice anymore because you live in a big glass house. I do not. It's totally different. I'm not marrying someone I shouldn't. Well, I'm marrying someone Dad wants me to, and trust Dad. At the end of the day, I guess that's it. I'm trusting that it's going to be okay. It's what Dad wants me to do, and he's never steered me wrong, and he never hurt me, and all he ever does is support me. Her father wanted what was best for her, and she knew it. She was just going to have to trust in the end like she trusted him. I know, Ren said, and putting her arm around Emerson. At least you have some good memories now. Emerson smiled really good. I don't want details, Ren said, patting Emerson's shoulder. She flashed back to being with Holden, and I'm not giving you any. They're sacred. As long as they're on the same page, Emerson smiled, and they went back to the checklist she was supposed to be dealing with. We're on the same page, which is currently a checklist for tonight's party that will go off without a hitch. Don't jinx it, Ren said, knocking resolutely on the wooden table. I'm not going to jinx it. It's one of your parties, so you know how it's going to be absolutely perfect. Let's see here. We'll stop so I can go put the laundry in the dryer. Hopefully it's done. I'll come back, read a little bit more of the book, and then I know I like even number videos, so I'll probably have to do a singing video. We'll just have to wait and see. Although I do work tomorrow, so I'm trying to get this all done quickly. So sit there, stay tuned. This is video number 1.